Marion, everybody big Marion fans here? I want to thank you for giving such a great roll-up for a panel dealing with people who's, if you look at the music and what the panel's about, couldn't be less associated with each other. So I think that was great to warm everybody up. Hi everybody, my name's Dan Didio. I am publisher of DC Comics, and I want to thank you all here. It's great to be here for Boston Comic Con. It was great to be back, and thank you for the weather. I missed this. They moved us out from New York to the West Coast, and boy, do I miss this humidity. Nothing like getting hit in the face with a wet blanket as soon as you step off a plane. But needless to say, I'm glad you all were able to get today. I'm excited about this panel. I get a chance to introduce two people I just enjoy working with. I've done immense work for DC Comics over the years, and in some cases over the decades. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce first the creator of 100 Bullets, writer of great characters, Batman, Superman, and so many other things, Wonder Woman, Mr. Brian Azzarello. As far away from me as possible, Brian, you know that, okay? Next one up. Honestly, this for me personally, it's been one of the great experiences of working at DC Comics. Actually, it's the one time I was ever really starstruck when I first started at DC, when I had a chance to meet the next person. He was bringing in pages to Dark Knight 2 at the time, final issue, third issue was coming in. And just the level of passion and work, it just was inspiring to me to be part of it, but also it's inspired so many great people. The credits are too long, the introduction is too long. It's time to introduce Mr. Frank Miller. This is good. This is actually, no. Actually, this is a chance. I wasn't kidding when I was saying that before. I think one of the things that was most exciting for me when I first started at DC, and it was Frank. You were in Bob Schreck's office, who was the editor of Dark Knight 2 at the time, DK2, Batman editor at the time, and you were talking through some of the pages of artwork that you were bringing in for Dark Knight 2. It was just post 9/11. You were in the offices, must have been around February or March, right after that. And you were describing the art, and I never forgot this because, for me, brand new to the company, only in for, I was one of you guys sitting in that audience, and now I'm standing in the room with Frank, and he's pulling out pages of Dark Knight 2, and you were talking about how you was working on the pages with nails, and scratching the pages with nails to get a visceral effect on the page. And I've never forgotten that description, and I never understood how you would even think of working in that fashion when you were doing a book like that. But Dark Knight for you, I'm going to go to Dark Knight 2 for a second. Let's start there. That was an interesting book because it's following such a classic material. You're stepping onto it. You're moving it in ways you didn't do it. You see your art evolving. Could you take us a little bit of the process of what it was like to follow up Dark Knight Returns with Dark Knight 2?
Sure. I mostly when I decided to do the sequel to Dark Knight, I wanted to open up the world of it and play with the whole playground of DC Comics. There were some guest stars in the first Dark Knight from the DC pantheon of heroes and villains, but essentially it was Batman's world with Superman as a guest star and punching bag. And in this one, I thought, let's bring in the spandex. Let's bring in the Atom. Let's bring in the Bottle City of Kandor, and all that goofy stuff that I grew up with. And in every case, take it completely dead seriously and do my best to make it work. And that usually meant, just to keep them fresh, reinterpreting each character. So, for instance, to do the Flash. I couldn't compete with Carmine Infantino. I couldn't draw a million little figures of Flash running and be as anatomically perfect as he was, and deadly that way. So I just made him already there. I didn't show him running. He was already sitting there, because he was so fast you couldn't see him go. and with Green Lantern, I just really looked over my Green Lantern comics and I went, I get it. He's God. He can do anything. He's Aladdin. He's got a magic lamp that can build or make anything. And I thought, what is holding this guy back?
Yellow.
Yellow wasn't enough. There had to be some other secret component besides yellow that was holding the Green Lantern back, and I finally figured out what it was. He's dumb as a post. And with the atom, it was a matter of the atom doesn't get big, atom doesn't get small, things get big. And then it becomes interesting to draw. In Black Canary, she was in there because she had the best costume any girl ever had in comics. How many superheroines have fishnets? Zatanna and Black Canary. And Black Canary's got the blonde wig.
And Brian, at that same time, you were at DC, working at the Vertigo. You broke in with Vertigo?
Yeah.
And first projects there, what were your first projects when you started in the DC universe? What were the first ones that brought you in?
Man, was it Lex Luthor?
Was it?
I remember Lex, yeah. I think it might have been, that might have been.
Because I remember when you first came on board, when I was there, you had the unenviable task of following Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb on Hush. And you and Eduardo Risso stepped on and did Batman right behind that. And it was interesting because it was a completely different take on Batman. And how was it feeling? For me, I think that was some of your earliest DC work. How was it to step on that and to take on those characters after working in such an independent field for a while?
Well, Jim called me about that. He said, hey, after Hush, we want you and Eduardo to take this over. And I said, well, we're doing 100 Bullets. He goes, no, we want you to take this over. And you know, Jim, it's like you can't say no to Jim because he doesn't hear the word. And if it's already done in his head, you know, it's a done deal. So we agreed to it if we could take everybody with us, because I figured if we're not doing 100 Bullets for 6 months, that means Trish isn't gonna. That's 6 months of coloring she's not gonna have, or Dave's not gonna have 6 months of covers. So it's like, let's just bring the whole team over. It was a good experience. I mean, people, I think on the coming after Hush, it was just like it couldn't have been more opposite of what Hush was.
Yeah.
It was a real small sort of like character-driven story. And I just wanted to treat the costume, Batman's costume, more like a trench coat. It's like, make it a, he's a detective, essentially.
And again, it was interesting because I see the both of you there. And I mean, Frank, you went from being very much, working on the corporate characters, work for hire, and then exploding into the creator business. And Brian, you went the opposite way. You started as a creator and moving into it. Do you see challenges in shifting back and forth from having that complete latitude and then to having to basically, work to a particular style of storytelling? I'll start with you first, Brian.
No, I don't. I mean, I approach the creator-owned work and the work for hire the same way. If I don't have a good story to tell, I'm not going to tell a story. I don't care if it's something that I'm doing myself or if it's one of these characters. If I don't have anything to say about Wonder Woman, I wouldn't have done her for 3 years. Yeah. I did Wonder Woman for 3 years.
And Frank, we go and we talk about this too, but I'd love for you, let's go backwards a little bit, back to Dark Knight Returns. Just the challenges you had really bringing that much creativity and new ideas to Dark Knight. When we sit and we talk to so many creators identify Dark Knight Returns as the pivotal book for them. Not only the sense of to understand their true creative width, but also getting them into the business. How did you start that?
Sorry.
How did you start that process of Dark Knight Returns, and how did you feel yourself evolving as you were creating it?
Well, the whole Dark Knight thing started with a conversation with Jeanette Kahn, who was running DC Comics, and she wanted me to come over from Marvel and do Batman for DC. Batman at the time was losing money, and they were wide open for new ideas and different ways to treat Batman. There's nothing, one thing I always tell people who are just getting started, look for a loser. Don't try to pick up X-Men. Try to find a book that nobody's reading and make it shine. Then you'll make yourself a reputation. And so I got this loser called Batman. And it was,
Can I just come, let me interrupt 1 second.
no, the character was never a loser. I'm
Yeah,
saying-
no. I want to contextualize this because it's very important for people to realize this. In 1984, Batman was the number 49 book being sold. It sold less copies than US 1 from Marvel. Okay? Just to put it in perspective. So when Frank describes this, it's not talking about the character being a loser, but the fact that it wasn't selling. Back to you, sir.
And so I sat down with Dick Giordano, who was the Batman editor at the time, and a man of terrific editorial instincts. And he wouldn't boss you around and tell you what words to use or tell you what villains to use, but he could just get to the guts of something. And he said, you know, we were having lunch one day, and he said, you know, the only way Batman works is if you make the readers really, really mad. So they want him to show up. So I started playing around with a story where there was a you know, you're in Gotham and there's a scene you can't see taking place in a taxi cab where the prostitute's in the cab and her pimp's in there with him, and we don't know exactly what she's doing to the poor woman, but he's clearly mutilating her. And then there's a thump on the roof, and very terrible things happen to the pimp, and you never see any of it happen. But I did the scene, and I realized the satisfaction I felt doing it. And I realized I'd hit on something that went beyond "you'll believe a man can fly," and touched on something that made these characters have a context. Something that superheroes largely felt that they lacked in the 80s was context. Was you know, that's why we needed Christopher Reeve to come along and recreate Superman for us. Somebody from outside had to do it. With the whole "you'll believe a man can fly" routine. And so with Batman, it was all a matter of following Dick's advice and bringing in the mythology, but bringing it in steadily, starting with his roots, Zorro and things like that, and Bruce Wayne's own torment with his parents' murder, and building it from the ground up as if there'd never been a Batman comic. And the essential way you have to approach this stuff, unless you're following a team that's just unbelievable, is to treat it like nobody's ever seen the comic book before. Jim Shooter, in fact, taught me in Marvel Comics to treat every issue as if nobody had ever seen it before, which was good advice.
I mean, it's interesting hearing that again, talking about the opposites again. You know, Brian, you stepped on Batman at its probably at its peak for one of the extended periods of time, probably since the Dark
Brought
Knight.
it right down.
You stepped on a Batman when nobody could do anything with it.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a thing there too. And we talked a little bit before, and you look at Batman's history as a character. You see how it changes with time. We talk about being a noir character in the 40s, a science fiction character in the 50s, a socially relevant character in the 60s, and then ultimately it keeps on evolving, which is each
Sorry, it was DC, it was the 70s. It should have been the 60s.
The 60s, I'm sure we always miss it by 10 years, but we get there. Sooner or later, we get there. So Brian, for you, I mean, with all the multiple interpretations, where did you draw your inspiration when you were writing the character? Where did you pull from? What do you remember fondly, and what did you bring to your storytelling?
Dark Knight 1.
Yeah.
That's, I didn't have a lot of experience with Batman, really, you know, or superheroes in general. I didn't really read superheroes when I was a kid. I liked the war comics, I liked the monster comics. And then in the 80s, I was reading, you know, Fantagraphics and some of the underground stuff. That was what I liked. And then somebody
Devil
recommended,
Dinosaur.
yeah, Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy.
What did he do?
Moon Boy?
What was his job?
He was supposed to ride the dinosaur. Right?
Okay.
It made sense at the time. It did.
No, it didn't. It didn't make any sense. A lot of those Kirby books didn't make any sense.
No.
Machine Man?
Hey,
No, well, listen, we're going off on that riff on the trivia.
2001? What was that about?
2001 was a masterpiece. Oh, you're talking about the movie, right?
I'm talking about the book.
Well, Frank, we talked before, we said.
Those were the most underground comics that were being put out in the 80s, were those
And
crazy
also the
Kirby.
amazing thing, the man didn't do drugs.
Well, you talk about Frank, you talk about Jack Kirby being an inspiration to you. Who are the other people that you draw from? We go through that. I mean, when you were building your art, your storytelling, what were your references? What did you pull forward?
Oh, the most outstanding one would be Will Eisner, who I studied and luckily got to learn from directly. And as far as people just that I abstractly studied, Gil Kane for dynamics and anatomy. Let's see, oh boy, I got Jack Kirby, Will Eisner.
Wally Wood.
Wally Wood for the just sheer attempt at beauty, as lame as mine was. And Jack Davis for expression, and so on. The easy guys in general were gigantic. But all the,
Kurtzman.
yeah, Kurtzman for storytelling. Of his type, the most outstanding. I mean, he was kind of like G.W. Griffith. He set a standard for a certain kind of storytelling and perfected it. Since we've been able to branch off and expand on it since, but he set a kind of metric storytelling that was fundamental to any understanding of comics. And as time's gone by, like people just keep coming in. I mean, I remember when just to pick somebody, the Brothers Hernandez showed up.
Yeah, well.
And they transformed the love comic and the fantasy comic, combined them in a way nobody'd seen in comics before. But we're very fortunate to have a field that attracts people, whether it's paying or not. And that through dark times when sales were low and the pay wasn't very good, people kept coming in. Now, when I first got into comics, Neil Adams ran a studio called Continuity Associates in Midtown Manhattan. And it was where comic book artists could come and pick up sort of day work for advertising. And just essentially junk work. But it would be enough to pay the bills so we could do comic books back when my paid rate was $25 when I first started working in comics. You can't live on that in Manhattan. But by coloring fish sticks and drawing things like that at Neil Adams' studio, I was able to make enough to survive. So people have kept this field alive through generations because people love comic books that much. It's really quite a wonderful history. I wish somebody would write it.
You know what, Brian? You never really give much of your story of how you broke into comics as well. I mean, that's really fascinating to hear. And I've heard a lot of stories. He cheated. Well, I cheated still.
I got a key.
What were your early days and what were your first works in comics?
Oh man, I first got Lou Stathis was he was a Vertigo editor, and I knew Lou from Reflex magazine, which was like a skater kind of music magazine that he was the editor of. I knew him from that, and then I think he edited Trouser Press, which was another music magazine, and I knew him through all that. And then he got a job at DC, and we would talk about stuff, and he just he said, "Why don't you pitch me something?" And the first thing I pitched at DC was Phantom Stranger, and it had all the elements that he hated, that Lou hated. And he said, "But you made it work." And he was always, he was, at the time, Vertigo was, as he described it, fairies and elves and shit. And
Last word important.
And it really, it kind of was, it was all that dark fantasy stuff, you know. Everything was sort of like swirling around
When you
sand.
got something that's named after a Hitchcock movie, and you put fairies and elves and shit in it, something's wrong.
So, that pitch went through and it was like 11th hour and it was supposed to, it looked like it was gonna get approved and we were like making plans and all this stuff and then Karen killed it. Because I was nobody. Like I didn't have a track record or anything. She didn't want to give me a chance.
Well, the other thing though is I've got to mention here, is that, that I was able to get into comics as a field because I could draw. Not well, but I could draw. It's a much harder field for writers to break into.
It's next to impossible now.
Yeah, and in fact, the way a vast number of people become writers in comics is by becoming editors. Doesn't mean they can write, but it means they're in the office.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very tough field to enter. I mean, people can tell pretty quickly if you can serviceably draw or not. Storytelling is a little harder to tell, but if they can't follow what's going on, they know you can't tell a story. But good writing is impossible to tell from bad writing unless you know what writing is. So it's a tougher field for writers to break into. One of the things that Dick Giordano did as editor-in-chief of DC was he changed the royalty system so that it would pay writers more than it had before, because he wanted to attract better and better writers to the field, because he believed one of the things that was hurting DC was bad writing. He felt that as Gil Kane had once many times commented publicly, that the quality of artwork was much higher than the quality of writing in comics. And I think that was one of the many things that brought writers like Brian and Alan Moore into comics and brought the level of writing up quite dramatically.
Well, you had something to do with it.
But I could draw.
Well, no, I mean, like, when I read your stuff, and Alan's stuff, it's like, wow, this is what this can be, you know? You can do this with these, you know, in the mainstream, with these characters, because it was eye-opening for me. Like, superheroes just bored the piss out of me when I was a kid. It was like, I'd rather read war stories.
Yeah. You know, but the thing is, the audience grew up, but it took a long time for retailers and publishers to realize it.
Mm-hmm. Like American Flag, Howard Chaykin's book. That was
Yeah.
like, whoa, this is like the coolest thing.
I mean, that was at the time outrageous.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah. Well, it wanted to be.
Yeah.
And it was proudly outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a wild time. I remember it, and where everybody was trying something new, and it was to see what would stick to the wall, because all of a sudden the field was exploding. There were publishers like Fantagraphics out there doing stuff that people hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good time.
First comics.
First Comics was competing more with Marvel and DC, with the kind of thing.
Yeah, but it was still edgier than
Yeah, it
what
was.
Marvel and DC was doing at the time.
It was trying to move comics into adolescence.
Yeah.
And then, you know, DC and then finally Marvel started moving into growing up. And DC did it across the board, and Marvel did it by introducing the Epic line, where they're willing to try more things. But it's been you gotta understand, this has been like an arduous process by people who all by and large love comics and wish them no harm. There aren't a lot of villains in this story.
Yeah. Who did Scout? Who published this?
That was Eclipse.
Was it Eclipse?
Timothy Truman, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. But like the smaller publishers were doing more adult material.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that
Because they were playing direct, they were playing to the direct market.
Yeah.
They understood with the direct market, the profits per comic book were so much higher that you could sell a lot less and make a lot more money. The old distribution system lost so much money hand over fist that it was a joke. It was a mafia-run mess.
Really mafia run, actually.
Yeah, literally.
I wasn't speaking euphemistically.
Hey, Brian, I want to go back to you one second because you told us about the job you didn't get. What was your first job, and what did you
Weird
get?
War Tales.
Me too.
That was the first thing I
Actually,
did.
after Twilight Zone, I did Weird War Tale.
Yeah, that was the first thing I did for DC, Weird War Tales. First thing I got paid for.
There you go. Okay.
And that was because the Phantom Stranger got killed, and Lou and his assistant, Axel Alonso was his assistant at the time, and they were like really kind of, it affected them. They were like kind of depressed. And it's like, God, it's like all they're taking here is known writers. We have to come up with a way to bring new talent in. And then Axel hit on the idea of reviving those anthologies. And then I did like two or three of those anthologies, and then Eduardo and I did Johnny Double.
Yeah, I mean, even from my standpoint, I find it missing anthologies, from the days of the House of Secrets.
I missed the 100-page giants with
Yeah.
all those old
Yeah.
comics in the back.
And those are things that the 100-page giants allowed you to expose people to characters and stories they wouldn't normally buy, something that they didn't see at the time. And then the anthology in particular broke so many people in, but there was a style of storytelling in anthology. You're telling 8-page stories different than six-issue arcs.
Yeah.
And there was a lot different type of writing, a lot of different storytelling, and I think a lot more craft on the page when you had to go do it.
It's harder. Writing 8 pages is harder than writing 20.
Yeah, O. Henry got his name for good reason.
Yeah. I mean, so let's go now to let's move on up to Dark Knight 3. And what I want to do is just get some of the
third
origin.
one?
Excuse me?
There's a third one?
There's a, well,
I thought we weren't going to tell him.
first of all, were you guys talking to each other, interacting even before Dark Knight 3?
We don't like each other.
No, we know that. That goes without saying. I just didn't want to share that in the open room, that's all. But what was your relationship before Dark Knight 3? We won't worry about what it is after, but let's worry about it. How did you first two meet? How did you first start talking through this?
We actually got along before Dark Knight 3. And Dark Knight 3.
Then Dark Knight 3 came, we haven't spoken since.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys like the book, because we really can't stand it. It's awful.
But was there any hesitation about both of you working together on this project? And how do you approach that differently than would you normally do something when you work on it independently? Start with you, Brian.
There was no hesitation at all. None. When he said he wanted to do it, it was like, yeah, when? Really, it was, sure, love to.
Now we're talking about swapping them back and forth.
Yeah.
And I mean,
like, we were
Keep him
just,
around until he's about 200 years old, nobody wants to see him, it smells bad.
the conversation we were just having about like different comics, different eras of comics, that's what we talk about. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do in an issue. Maybe. And that was really, that was just like sitting around in the studio just then. That's what struck me.
and how
We have a really good time, which is like a lot of people don't believe.
That is something that a lot of people tend not to know about comic book people, is that we are a bunch of little kids having a ball in the playground. And when you hear us working on stories, you'll mostly hear laughter.
Yeah, it's really fun. We do voices.
Yeah. Until the sharp objects come out, and then I can't describe the things that happen. What are you laughing about?
Well, the question is then, when you started the Dark Knight 3 process, how much has it evolved along the way? How much of that story that you started with still exists? And how has it continued to move?
It's gotten too damn long.
Yeah. What was the first sentence? It's like, are you sure you want to call it the Master Race?
Yeah, he didn't like that title.
Yeah, you did. That's true. You did question that.
I thought it had a certain pleasant historical
He said it's
resonance.
provocative. It's meant to provoke. Like, well, okay, you picked a good one.
Look, you've got a bottle full of people who are as strong as Superman. You open the bottle. What do you have? What are we?
Yeah.
And
And was that and that concept alone, that thought, is that the start of the story for you? Or when did you first think it would be a Dark Knight 3?
Brian?
When you called me and said,
It's a much better process than the way you just made it sound.
hey, Frank wants to talk to you. Okay.
It's like, get the defibrillator ready, we gotta start the heart again and see if the old guy can come back.
Well, we did talk about it a great deal, about Dark Knight 3 beforehand, and I mean, I want to think it was almost like a 2-year conversation before we even got to the point that it was good to
I
go.
think it was.
Well, there's a very old saying that goes back to John Wayne movies and such. The old heroes never die, they just fade away. Batman won't fade away, he's too mean. He's the one that won't go away. Superman's perfectly ready to, but Batman's just, it's like, there is just something so compelling about that character that writers and artists are drawn to him. He's the one everybody seems to want to do. And there seems a character that good always has new stories in it.
So, and for you, Brian, when you're coming on board to this now and you're doing this, how much of the pre-existing material do you feel like you're drawing from, or do you feel like you're charting new territories with Frank on this?
Oh, both. I mean, we're definitely, I think what 3 has become, and it kind of was going to be from the get-go. It's like, let's take 2 and 1 and put them together, because those, and try to create a completely new beast out of it. I think we've succeeded in something like that. I think Andy's really pulling it off, man.
Yeah.
His art is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about this on occasion too, about with Andy's art.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could see his art evolving, and I know Frankie's had a lot of conversations with you, and what sort of coaching and conversations do you have with Andy as he's crafting some of the material for Dark Knight 3?
Oh, boy. To be honest, there's not much I have to teach Andy.
He had a pretty good teacher.
He kind of had this dad who could draw comics pretty damn well. And what I've done mostly is counsel him in things that worked within the particular context of Dark Knight. Just things that had to do with my peculiar experience of doing Dark Knight. I would never try to teach Andy Kubert anything about draftsmanship. His storytelling is absolutely strong, but it's really job specific. I'm there to help when it has to do with Dark Knight, and then I'm also there to learn.
I mean, you can see this beautiful work that's being done inside those books. And how did it feel for you? Because you've been doing the mini comics, the little comics inside. It seems like you're having a lot of fun with that too.
Especially if my girls are in it.
Yeah. And your girls are, of course, for the.
Lara and Carrie.
And we have a rule that no one's allowed to draw those characters but you. And I think that's your rule, by the way. I think
I have my ways of enforcing it.
But what makes those characters so special to you?
Well, they were derived from these legendary characters that we all grew up with, but they were very much daughters of those characters. One symbolically, the other in fact, and I felt that they brought a rather distinctly feminist air to a very masculine comic book universe. But also, but basically it was great to see the girls suit up too, and the whole in both cases they have attributes that their fathers don't have. Particularly in the case of Carrie, because my plan with her from very early on was that she is the one guy, the one person that he's met in his entire life who's smarter than he is. And he has to finally admit that.
And Brian, when you're writing on those books, is there any characters you're gravitating to, or you want to give extra screen time because you like them more than others?
Killer Croc, that's my favorite DC character. Lara, definitely Lara. Yeah, I really like writing her. I like what she can do.
She's got the temper.
I like bad girls.
After 3 years of Wonder Woman, that you've done the same. Back to you both now. It's a collaborative process working together. Do you feel like you've compromised any of the individual vision you have for the characters, or do you feel that in places you've just let it go or fought for something a little bit more?
Well, the wonderful thing about these characters is that neither of us own them. Is that in this context, that's wonderful. If one of us had an absolute territorial right over these characters, then one of us might have to kill the other. But we've got every reason to negotiate and see reason. We also have enough respect for each other to see the other's point of view. So I haven't felt any desire at all to even mutilate Brian.
It's good while we get through we haven't completed it yet, so that's good to know. And Brian, how about for you? Is there anything that you really wanted to see in the story that you pushed hard for? Is there anything that you feel that it needed that you backed away from?
No, it's been really great working on this thing.
It's big enough. It's got so much room.
We have a great time doing it, and what's really cool. Like nobody working on this book really brings any ego to the project. It's like we all understand. It's like this is what's important. I'm not important. You're not important. Andy's not important. This is what's important. And Andy's like Andy does thumbnails. Somebody like Andy doesn't really need to do thumbnails and show us ahead of time. But he does, and
well, a good project brings out a spirit of generosity that you just see. People want to visit each other's places, show off what they're doing, but also say we're consulting when they actually want to show off too, and keep the blood going. That's what a good project just raises the spirits everywhere there is.
I want to go to the mini comic for a second. Now, Frank, you had the idea for the mini comic, and you wanted something that fell out of the comics, and we could not oblige you on that.
No, of course you couldn't.
But
Monsters.
but looking at the mini comics themselves, how do you determine what's the story for the mini comics? Are you choosing them very particular, and how do you make sure that they have a value for the overall story itself when you approach them?
Well, character first. Who really makes a good and worthwhile character first? Lara is an obvious and good heroine for a story. So is Carrie, whether it's as Robin or as Batgirl. Other characters like the Atom become a fun possibility because it's been a long time since we've really seen a really cool Atom comic. And in the context of Dark Knight, there's different story possibilities. A lot of these characters, these wonderful second and third tier DC characters, haven't had their own titles in decades. And they're one good treatment away from having from being brought back. And so why not give them a test run? DC Comics canceled Showcase a long time ago. Big mistake.
And Brian, also the mini comics themselves, it's a smaller format naturally,
Format.
less pages. Do you approach writing the mini comic differently than writing the actual book itself?
yeah, I do, because I think what you said is really on point. The big book is plot driven, but the minis are really just like character. They're real character specific. It's like to show a different, aspect of the way these people think or behave rather than, advancing the plot so much. Though the greatest thing
I've ever done in comics was cutting off Green Lantern saying,
Yeah, that was up there. That was up there, yeah.
that's the most satisfying moment I've ever had.
Were you thinking of your father or anything? Would you please lie down on the couch?
Well, you know what? I just checked my watch here. We got about 20 minutes left of the panel. Do we have any questions from the audience? Do we have some questions? What I can ask you to do, there's a microphone here. If we could just line up over here, and if we could just take the line behind this, and we'll see how many of these we can get to in the time we have. First question.
Thank you. This has been a great panel, well done, and I'm loving the new books, really enjoying all of it. And so I'm a huge fan, Frank, huge fan. And
You're not so big.
Oh, that's all.
A decade ago, I got a job at an NPR station, a public radio station, and the news director, I was telling, he started talking about when he started in New York, a contemporary of yours, about how he used to hang doors for a job. And I said, that's funny, Frank Miller used to hang doors as a carpenter as a job. He goes, I was his roommate. And so I got to really enjoy, his name was Steve Young.
No kid, Steve. Many years.
So I got to enjoy stories about that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that time and about how you look back, the balance between how much diligent I was drawing every day and doing what I had to do with my hands and my mind, and luck.
I didn't eat a lot. I took very long walks, and learned to love the city from the ground up. You know, in a way that's indescribable. I met the comics community inch by inch, and found basically a very warm, welcoming community of people. Many of us weren't making much in the way of money. As I mentioned before, Neil Adams was keeping a lot of us afloat by giving us advertising work. It was a very dedicated group of people in a time when people just weren't buying comic books, and people weren't buying comic books because they were kind of cost too much, and we didn't have good distribution, and we just, in the end, they weren't very good, mostly. So it's a time I remember very fondly, but mainly just because there was so much community and so much faith. I probably lost complete track of your questions.
That was it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say again, like everyone else, we're all huge fans of both of your works, and I was just wondering, in regards to like the future of your Dark Knight, have you ever thought of bringing Harley Quinn into the universe, and if so, how would you have handled her?
I require Bruce Timm's and Paul Dini's permission. Other than that, I couldn't wait. Well, she would be, but no, someone else could put the costume on. Forget about that. Come on, I had a Catwoman, you know.
But she was old.
But Carrie put the costume on. I'd ask them first. But Harley, I'd love to draw her. In fact, I have, just for my own pleasure. It wasn't meant to be funny. I do a lot of drawing for my own pleasure. It's a hobby and a job. It's really that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just curious, what were your thoughts on the film Batman vs. Superman? Because it was kind of based off of your Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, wow.
Think so?
Yeah, kind of. So I'm just curious, what were your thoughts on that movie?
I liked Wonder Woman.
Next question.
That's very good. Or
question regarding Sin City.
Sure.
You clearly describe a fallen world. It's called Sin City. From where did it fall? Where do you think you get your sense of the holy so that that can be seen as Sin City?
It's going to take a little while to answer that. And Sin City is based on crime movies of the 1940s and 50s. And they were done after World War II, when we went from being a very idealistic country to a total emotional and cultural crash, where the country felt very sorry for itself, and there was deep despair. And the crime movie became very popular. I found parallels in the 80s when I came up with Sin City and translated that. But mostly, like most comics, I did it because it included everything I wanted to draw. And it included tough guys, hot cars, and gorgeous women. That's a lot of what I like to draw in life. And I like a good crime yarn. So I felt with Sin City, I'd created a vehicle I could keep going with for the rest of my life.
Thank you. Next question.
This is for Frank Miller. I'm curious though, I know I read somewhere, or at least I listened to an audio commentary by Bruce Timm, you were very enthusiastic about the Batman animated series episode where they did the tribute to Dark Knight Returns.
Sure.
So speaking of that, I'm curious, have you ever seen the DC animated adaptations of your work, like Batman Year One and the two-part Dark Knight movies?
Yes, it did. And I enjoyed them, but I don't watch them regularly because it just feels a little too self-congratulatory.
Also, I like your Daredevil book, by the way. Hopefully Dan doesn't mind me talking about Marvel.
I noticed your shirt, buddy. we still let you
Excuse me.
online.
Okay, first off, thank you, and second, Mr. Didio, you don't own this mic. You're way too young to get that joke.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering, for each artist, writer, what would you consider to be your best scene in each of your comics? Like, whatever comic?
Oh yeah, I got Lucy.
Like I said, cut off Green Lanterns.
Okay, he gets the symbolic castration vote.
There's been, I mean, like, just in this.
Okay, I'll give you mine.
I mean, like, in both your comics, like, various words, like, out of all the
Okay,
comics.
we gotta shoot blind here because your question's way too big.
Yeah.
Alright,
But so he gave you his answer. My answer is in Dark Knight when the Joker broke his own neck.
thank you.
Thank you.
I just recently read one of your Daredevil books,
Uh-huh.
and I was wondering, why did you make him so, like, dark and gritty?
I was in a mood.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank, this kind of goes back to Batman vs. Superman.
Sure.
How do you feel about the whole DC entertainment extended universe? How, like, all that?
God bless them.
Also,
I mean, what can I say? They're toys, they play with them, and every once in a while I get to play with them too. I mean, it's a, A, I hope they do a good job, and B, I hope they do well. So we all do well.
also, how would you feel if they made like a straight up Dark Knight Returns adaptation with Ben Affleck in a few years? I mean, I get that Batman vs. Superman took some inspiration from it, but like, if they made a straight up Batman vs. Superman, a Dark Knight Returns, like straight up adaptation, live action, with Ben Affleck.
It's gotta be Ben Affleck, huh?
I want to see it in a part of this universe.
The Ben Affleck universe?
Yeah.
Oh. So you got a universe?
Well, I mean, like,
I ain't in a town. But with Ben Affleck,
Yeah. So you guys like Ben Affleck as Batman?
No.
No?
Yes.
I kind of did.
I thought he was fine.
I thought he was awesome.
Awesome? I won't give him awesome.
Gail Godot is awesome.
No, I thought he was fine.
I agree with that.
I thought Wonder Woman stole the movie. I told you. But
That trailer, I hope the movie's as good as that trailer.
Also, one more.
what was the question again?
I was just wondering how you would
Do you
feel
like
about
Ben Affleck? That's the
straight up.
Ben Affleck started with Dark Knight Returns?
Yeah, just
He's
like,
young.
Like in a few years.
Batman's old in Dark Knight.
He's already 43.
He's
Batman
got 7
started
years
at
in.
55 in Dark Knight.
I'm just like in a few years.
And in the third one, he's got, what, 120?
All right. Thank you.
Oops, I'm sorry, we just got cut. Okay, well listen, first of all, I just want to thank Frank and Brian for joining us here. We just told them we have no time. Thank you all for joining us.